Well, we have turned the calendar to the month of July, and that means there are no more months without college football until February. Let's have a Q&A, shall we? Right here on the 3 Technique.
One man. Goodbye. Hello, Heisman.
20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50, 45. There goes Davis. Oh, my God. Davis is going to run it all the way back. Auburn's going to win the football game.
They give it back now to the 30. They're down to the 20. All the band is out on the field. He's going to go into the end zone.
Four-man Alabama rush. Got him. No, they didn't. Oh, my gracious.
Yep.
How about that?
Welcome in, boys and girls, to another edition of the 3 Technique, the college football podcast at the intersection of the X's and O's and Jimmy's and Joe's. It's a Garrett and Trey show once again. Today, it'll be a Garrett and Trey show on Friday as Mitch and his lovely bride continue to celebrate their wedding on their honeymoon. We're totally happy for them. Very happy that we get to hold down the fort so they get to continue to celebrate. But Garrett, you're a little under the weather. Appreciate you battling through it. You're playing a little hurt today, but we appreciate you fighting through it, my friend.
Yeah, man. And speaking of under the weather, I'm very glad that, Mitch and his beautiful bride are not heading to Jamaica as was originally scheduled, because there's, maybe a little bit of weather that's about to blow through there. No, I get to take them to the airport in the morning because I'm a good friend, and don't get an Uber on your way to the airport first time, and then he shows up and you miss your plane, right? That's no good. So they're going to head off, and it'll be a lot of fun. So if anybody is in the South Florida area, look out for Mitch, and maybe buy him and his bride a little bit of a drink or something like that while they're heading off and celebrating.
Yeah, buy him a drink, talk some Miami Hurricanes football, and just celebrate that you're not going to the Caribbean this week. Thoughts and prayers for those folks down there for sure, as that hurricane situation looks really scary. Garrett, it's July. Like I mentioned off the top, we are out of months without college football until February. And so this week is going to be a nice transition period. After this week, we are going to be head on into preview season. We've got a week of our darlings and our spoilers coming up really soon. Then it's full on into preview season, where we have our previews. If you're not subscribed, make sure that you are locked in. Follow us on Instagram and Twitter at 3TechPod, and make sure you like us and subscribe on all of your favorite podcast platforms as well. YouTube, we'd love your subscription as well, so you can watch the show. And Garrett, this show is all possible thanks to our friends at Home Field Apparel. You know them by now. They are the good brand, and they are ready to hook you up for all of your gear needs in the fall. I know they just did an OU refresh this week, and a couple other refreshes are coming down the pipe. That OU refresh looked pretty sweet. Going back to the disco logo, tons of fun things that you can find on their website, homefieldapparel.com. And you can use our code 3TechPod for 15% off your order at checkout, or use the link in our bio to get 15% off a return order. Anything you want, all of it is included. On our Friday show, we will be picking our winner for the $150 gift card. So if you're listening to this right now and you have not entered, what have you been doing at this point? But we'll give you one more chance. We'll give you one more chance to get into that drawing, and hopefully it will be your lucky name. Garrett, as we transition into preview season, this is the perfect time to do a little temperature check of the Jimmys and Joes. We put out a call for questions, and there were some great ones that came in the replies. There were some great ones that came in the DMs. And there were a lot of people that utilized our hot take question when they were filling out that survey for each of the conferences. So we gave you an opportunity to share your hot takes. We'll share some of those as well and let you know what we think. But let's start off with let's start off with the 5-Star Sports Pod on Twitter. Close to home for us. One state over. Will the LSU defense be better this year with Blake Baker at defensive coordinator? So obviously a much maligned defense last year in Baton Rouge. Very uncharacteristic of both Brian Kelly and the LSU program that we've come to know over the years, but it was bad. To the tune that, you had to have a Heisman level quarterback to even have a somewhat respectable season, not just last year, but the last couple of years. So Blake Baker comes over from Mizzou. He was a linebacker coach at LSU before that, but had a very respectable defense and, dare I say, a very good defense with the Missouri Tigers the last couple of years. I don't know. New coordinators always tend to get the fans hyped up. They always seem to make the fans ready to just forgive all the other misgivings of the past. But what do you think? Is Blake Baker the solution in Baton Rouge?
He's about as good as a solution as you could probably expect. I was looking up their numbers right here. So looking up LSU last year, they were 82nd in opponents' points per game. They gave up 28 a game last year. And if you look at kind of breaking down what they did doing that, they went 255 passing. They gave up 255 passing, and then gave up 161 rushing a game. It's not a fantastic number, and that's kind of a big point where I think we've all kind of talked about that. LSU struggling to stop the run in recent years, at least stopping the run as effectively as they've kind of been used to in Baton Rouge. Much better, I think it will be with the new Missouri coach. When you look at Missouri's stats, 26th in opponents' points per game. That was 20.8, not 28. That's a lot better. Saving yourself a touchdown a game. And looking at the yardage, 213 through the air and 122 on the ground, definitely improved there. And I think the big thing is LSU should have more talent. There are a lot of really good players on that Missouri defense, but overall, I think the roster's better at LSU, so it should be better. I mean, that's kind of my initial take. I don't know if you agree or not, but that's kind of where I am to kind of start off.
I don't know that it'll just be Blake Baker. I do think that he is going to be a lot better than what they've had in the past. He also was made the highest paid assistant in college football. So you hope you get the return on investment if you're the LSU Tigers. But I think the talent at LSU, especially being a year older this year, so many of their top guys were young. Harold Perkins is finally an upperclassman. Seems like he's been on the field forever, but he is finally an upperclassman. We talked so much last year about how he was never put in the right position to succeed, it seemed like, for large portions of that year last year. So I'm excited to see. Blake Baker did a lot with much less talent at Mizzou than he will have to work with at LSU. And I think that's something that LSU fans can be really confident about. So will it be a top 5 unit in the country? Probably not, but I do think that they're going to see some marked improvement this year.
Yeah, well, and they're going to need to, I think, because kind of what LSU's been able to do the last couple of years is just get away with having an awesome offense that, kind of keeps other teams off the field, or at least keeps them in passing scenarios with the game script. They're screaming out to leads and scoring a bunch of points, and so that does put the pressure on. The problem is, those games have been a little closer than they probably should have been. I know they've had a couple with Arkansas that have been a little too close, and there've been some circumstances for LSU that I don't think a lot of Tigers fans are happy with in terms of what they're bringing in and kind of what their defense ends up performing at. So, you take Daniels out. I know a lot of people are hyped about Nussmeier and what he could do. I'm not necessarily trying to doubt the kid. I'm just saying he won't be what Daniels was at the end of last year and kind of down the stretch last season. With that, you're going to need a much better performance out of your defense to kind of keep LSU in some of these games. I think they'll do it. I think almost out of necessity they'll do it because, it's going to be that or it's just going to be fail, right? And I don't think LSU is going to fail this year. I think they're going to be able to score points on offense, but they're going to have to be a lot better on defense. And, Blake Baker, he's probably the guy to do it. I think in terms of what you could have expected to hire, he's about as good as you could do, and I think there will be an improvement.
Yeah, 33 points per game in conference games that they gave up last year. That is not that's not an LSU defense that will that we've been accustomed to, quite frankly, since the turn of the century. And I think that LSU fans demand more, and I think they'll start getting a little closer. I think, you talk about the run defense, but the secondary really wasn't very good either. I'm thinking back to that Ole Miss game where they just got picked apart.
They got torched, yeah.
So many of even some of their wins, like they beat Missouri on the road last year, ironically, getting Blake Baker from Missouri,
yep.
Put up 49 points on his defense last year, but they were torched by that offense. They were, Florida put up a lot of points on them. Texas A&M without a head coach, put up a lot of points on them. So it was an ugly, ugly picture for the LSU fans. And I'm not telling LSU fans anything they don't know, right? So
Yeah.
there's not really, go back to the question, it's really hard to be worse, right? So they will be better.
Sure.
How much better remains to be seen for sure. And I think they can make a big jump. If they're a top 50 unit, I think we're talking about a slam dunk college football playoff contender. Yeah.
Oh yeah, no, for sure. Well, because I mean, you look at what they did. I'm just going through the numbers again. They were the number one scoring offense last year. They won't be that this year, but they're really good on offense. They've got good talent. They're going to have their guys step up. They're going to have guys figure out their roles. Who's going to be your lead guy in the receiver room, right? Who's going to be your primary option in the red zone, right? You're going to have to kind of figure that out. But you know, they got good coaches. They'll get there. They'll trial and error the first couple weeks, and they'll figure out what they need to do. But they were 82nd in opponent scoring. Like, that's not acceptable for an LSU team. They should not be 82nd with as talented as they are. So, you know, it's again, I'm not ragging on LSU, right? I'm not trying to sit there and be like, oh, LSU, you're bad, I don't like it. Like, we're not saying that. We're saying LSU's got to be a lot better on defense. And if they can make that improvement, even just finish with like a top 50 unit and then keep their offense in the top 10, they're definitely a playoff contender. They're, you know, going to get one of those spots. They'll probably finish, you know, 10-2 or 11-1 with a top 50 defense. And then they'll be able to go out there and you know, what they'll be able to do with their matchups. You know, I'm thinking already, if they're, you know, they don't win the SEC, but they get like a 5 or a 6 seed, and then somebody has to go to Baton Rouge for their first playoff game. That would be disgusting. I don't know which, you know, Big Ten, you know, Penn State's going to end up down there, but it's not going to be a fun time in Baton Rouge if that happens.
A Baton Rouge in December, not any elements that are probably going to be difficult to deal with, but a lot of occasions with a lot of time.
The elements will be the fans, exactly.
Exactly. I would love to see a home playoff game in Baton Rouge, just for the spectacle
crazy.
of it. Garrett, let's move on to a take that I saw in our YouTube comments. And this is kind of a two-pack, both from Michigan fans. I'm assuming Michigan fans, judging by what they said. We had Tom and Sean. Tom said that Michigan, they're talking about the Texas versus Michigan game, week 2. Michigan will win this game, and it won't be close. And Sean doubles down and says Will Johnson is going to get 2 interceptions off of Quinn Ewers in this game. So, you know, we did a whole segment on this game not too long ago. You can go check our video on breaking down the X's and O's of this game. But is this? I'll start with the take that Michigan is going to win this one going away. Do you have that in the range of outcomes for this game?
I think it's in the range of outcomes, but not the way a lot of people see it. If Michigan can go back to playing their style of football, where they just lean on you, right? This is what they did so well last year. They lean on you, they lean on you, they lean on you. It's a defensive game. And then somewhere down the stretch, they just score 1 or 2 breakaway touchdowns. Yeah, that could be a possibility. I don't think that Texas is going to just roll over, though. I don't think that they're just going to be a, you know, hey, we're going to go down without a fight. So I would put that, yes, in the range of possible outcomes, but I'd put it pretty low down the line on that. I think the big thing about this is, look, games are won and lost up front. A lot is going to be made about, you know, the new quarterback for Michigan, and, you know, they lost Blake Corum and everything else. But I don't think enough people are talking about how Michigan's offensive and defensive lines are dominant, and they are going to be the better unit against Texas both ways. So does that turn into, you know, a bad day for Quinn Ewers where he's getting sacked or pressured a bunch, and, you know, he can't get enough time to find his new receivers, which, again, remember, Texas is losing a lot of talent on the offensive side. They've got a lot of talent, and they nailed it in the transfer portal and did a really good job recruiting. They've got talent on the roster, but they're losing, you know, Xavier Worthy. They're losing a lot of guys, you know, A.D. Mitchell. We're losing a lot of guys that are, you know, massive key contributors, Jatavion Sanders as well. Key contributors on that offense that without them, you know, this offense is going to be a little different. And this is week 2. So, again, role players, you know, learning what they need to do, receivers figuring out who's the main guy, Ewers building up chemistry with all those guys. It'll be a challenge. And that's a really good Michigan front 7. That's a really good Michigan, specifically defensive line. So they probably will give Texas some problems. That being said, Texas is talented enough on offense to keep this one close. I don't think that they're going to run away with it. I don't really think either side runs away with this one. I think this is a relatively low scoring affair. But I think, your final score could be something like a 28-24 or maybe even a 31-27, but something relatively low scoring for what you would expect out of a Texas or a Michigan win.
Texas is a 3.5-point favorite right now, according to FanDuel. If you held a gun to my head, I think I would take Michigan in the points right now. I think Texas offensive line is going to hold their own against Michigan. Quinn will get pressured a little bit, but that is going to be one of the best offensive line units in the entire country this year. If they can't hold their own against this Michigan defensive line, the rest of the Big Ten needs to really, really temper their expectations against Michigan, because no one in the Big Ten will be able to hold their own against Michigan if Texas cannot do it. So I do think that Texas O-line will hold relatively strong. Michigan will get a couple sacks. They'll make a couple plays in the backfield. But what I'm really worried about for Texas is the inverse of that. I think they lost too much talent on the defensive line, and Michigan is reloading on the offensive line. So I do see a scenario where Michigan gets 5 or 6 yards a carry and doesn't really have to do anything too creative offensively, and they are able to move the football. We saw that against Washington, right? We saw an undersized D-line that made a lot of plays throughout the year, but an undersized D-line that was dealing with some injuries against Michigan in that national championship game. And didn't Donovan Edwards rip off like a 67-yard touchdown run or something like that?
His first two carries, quite literally, his first two carries went for long touchdowns.
Yeah, that is a scenario that I could see happening. Now, I think Texas will keep it much closer than Washington was able to in that national championship game. Texas is far more talented. Texas will hopefully not be dealing with the injuries that Washington was dealing with
right
at the end of that game. But people just cementing Texas, saying that Texas is just going to waltz into the big house and win this relatively easily, I don't see that happening at all. I think this game is going to be a dogfight. I think it's going to be low scoring. Like you said, I would probably also take the under at 48.5 if you held a gun to my head right now in July. I think it's going to be an absolute heavyweight knockdown, drag-out fight.
Well, and you mentioned it briefly, but I think there's a real chance that the run game for Michigan is going to carry them, because the other thing that we've seen is if you don't necessarily have the talent of the other offense, you can still control the game on the ground, right? It would not surprise me at all if you see Donovan Edwards get like 30 carries in this game, and then, Alex Orji, kind of a run-first type quarterback. Maybe he's, still working on the pass game. It's a lot of quick completions, but he throws in another 10, 15 carries, and, they end up running for something like 300 yards and score a bunch and all that. Like, that wouldn't necessarily shock me in terms of outcomes for this game. And then if you're, Quinn Ewers and company, you have to be extremely efficient with the time that you have the ball with the rested Michigan defense, right? Your defense running out of gas, and so they're, starting to do that kind of that's within the realm of possibilities. Now, look, when you got Quinn Ewers, you feel pretty good about your ability to win any game you're playing in, because he's a really good quarterback and he can make any throw on the field. So, is it going to be a thing where, Quinn just comes in there and rips them apart? That's also within the realm of possibilities. He could just go out there and ball out and get like 400 yards passing. I just, I'm also looking at this and saying Michigan didn't bend on the defensive side. Their secondary didn't really bend against Washington. And, you're thinking, like, what were they able to do to Michael Penix, Rome Odunze, like the whole, you know what I mean? Like, what were they able to do that whole game? They kind of just shut it down. And they kind of just said, like, no, like, we're not going to let you do what you normally do. I mean, Penix had one of his worst games of his, career at Washington in that national championship game. And that's not because he's a bad player. It's not because he wasn't ready for the moment. It's because Michigan's that good on defense. If they can do that again, I don't see where Texas is better, especially not on the road at the big house.
It's going to be a fascinating game, and I think it's going to be a fun benchmark for both of these teams. Both of them lost a lot. Michigan definitely lost more than Texas. They do get home field. Sharon Moore, this is going to be a fantastic test for him as well. But if there's one thing that I know about him as a play caller, he does not get cute. he has proven that time and time again over this run the last 2 or 3 years with the Wolverines. He is not going to get cute. He will run the ball until you prove that you can stop it. And then he'll get creative in the passing game when he absolutely has to. So, and that's not a knock on him. That's not saying his offense is boring. He gets stuff done. And Kirk Campbell coming in and being promoted to the offensive coordinator, promoted from within, he's going to be the exact same way. Yep. So Texas is going to have to bring their big boy pants. They found their big boy pants last year. Yep. And they're going to compete in this game. I don't think it'll be a blowout either way. The secondary could be to address the Will Johnson comment. I don't think he'll pick off Quinn Ewers.
That would be exceptional. And I just want to be clear. I think Will Johnson is going to lock down whoever he's across from. I would be shocked if the receiver if it's Isaiah Bond or whoever else. I'd imagine he'd be on Bond. Whoever he's going to be across from, I would be shocked if that receiver gets 50 yards receiving, just because Will Johnson is that level good. He is that level talented. If you don't watch this guy's game, go watch his game. Like he has held his own against much better receivers than whatever Texas is going to try out against him. And that's not to knock Texas receivers. I'm just saying he's done it against the top level talent. He did it against Marvin Harrison Jr. He, held him in check. He did it against Washington, their entire receiving corps. Like this is a guy who can do that, right? He held Alabama in check last year, right? So, I would be shocked if he gets 2 picks, because I would think even if he gets an interception, I would imagine Quinn kind of just stops throwing that direction at a certain point and just says like, well, I saw him pick off a ball that I thought was pretty good, so I'm just going to not worry about him. I'm going to figure out where Will Johnson is. I'm going to go this side of the field now, and just kind of decide not to throw at him besides, throwing 2. If he throws 2 picks on Will Johnson, Michigan could blow this game out.
If he throws 1, I don't think they're going to go that way again the rest of the game. So, yeah, this is going to be a fun game. Bottom line, if you're a Michigan fan or a Texas fan hearing us talk about this, don't be overconfident in this game either way, because I think it's going to be an absolute knockdown, drag out, bare knuckle fight. And I can't wait to watch it and be glued to my screen the entire time. All right, Garrett, we got another question in our direct messages. This one comes in from Thomas. He said, if you could pick one game to attend week 7 this year, which one would it be and why? And he gives us a few options here. Ole Miss at LSU, Texas and Oklahoma and Dallas, of course. We've got Penn State at USC, or Ohio State at Oregon. So a couple of traditional SEC matchups and a couple of traditional Big Ten matchups, right? But all those are on the same day, October 12th, I believe, if I have my dates right. Yeah, Saturday, October 12th. You can pick one of those games. Which one are you going to and why?
Okay, so I pulled up the slate just to make sure we're not missing anything here. Let's see. I've got Ohio State, Oregon on that list.
Yep. So the 4 he listed were Ohio State, Oregon, Penn State at USC, Texas, Oklahoma, and Ole Miss at LSU.
Yeah,
those are the 4 he listed at least.
There's some really good games this week, by the way. There's a couple G5 games that are pretty fun too. Out of those, I think Ohio State, Oregon would be my pick. I think that might be one of the best games of the year. First off, I mean, it's at Oregon, and Autzen been on my bucket list for sports traveling. I really want to find my way up to Autzen someday and be able to go up there, see a game up there. But I think there's a chance that this is going to be for whoever is the top seed out of the Big Ten, because I think whoever wins this game is going to be squarely in the driver's seat of the Big Ten Conference. And I think that this game will end up being a game that matters for seeding later on. The winner of this game almost guarantees a spot to the playoff, even if they don't win the conference. But I think that game's going to be just insane with, the Oregon fans and bringing in Ohio State, and, Ohio State trying to figure it out. They do have a new quarterback. They got a little bit new talent in the receiver room. So, it might, I know it'll be week 7. So that'll basically be broken in. But I think there's a lot of Oregon fans that are sitting there like, no. We got, Gabriel, he's coming in. He's, plenty of experience. He's got almost too much experience. They got a super talented receiving core. That game is almost can't miss. I don't care what you're doing. You got to sit in front of a TV for that game regardless. That's going to be a fun one to watch. If I couldn't make it to that one, I mean, Ole Miss LSU is going to be a lot of fun. That's going to be a lot of points scored in that one. And I think that's going to be a lot of fun football in the South. Any game at Tiger Stadium is going to be a lot of fun. So, that would be a kind of a secondary one if I couldn't make it up to Autzen because the flights are too expensive or something.
That Ole Miss LSU game is already locked in as a night game. That was released a couple weeks ago, so that ups the ante just a little bit.
Oh yeah,
I have never been to Red River, and it's certainly on my college football bucket list. I've obviously, as a Texan, been to the State Fair. I've been in and around the Cotton Bowl Stadium multiple times. I've never gotten to go to a Red River game, and I think this year's could be really, really fun. You could have an OU team that is desperate and a Texas team that's looking to make a statement. So that could be a really, really fun game. Seems like that game, regardless of what the spread is, always ends up being really entertaining.
Oh yeah.
A couple of years ago, notwithstanding that blowout that Texas gave to Oklahoma.
Just whooped them.
I do want to give some love to Penn State at USC. I believe that's the first time that the Trojans will host a big-time Big Ten opponent. Will there be more Penn State fans than USC fans in that stadium? Probably.
There's a good chance.
I think that it could be a fun environment, and it could be a very pivotal game for both of those teams. So Penn State, we've talked a lot about them this offseason. We haven't talked as much about USC going into the Big Ten. I have a hot take about them I can give you either today or on our next episode.
I will say they do host Wisconsin a little bit earlier, so like it should be. Yeah, there'll be a little bit of
see the color contrast in that one though, because they're both red. So, the red and the blue is going to be way more of a color contrast.
Oh yeah,
but it's going to be a situation where USC is probably going to need to win that game to stay relevant in the Big Ten title race, if that's something that they are doing this year. And Penn State, to prove that they're a true playoff contender, needs to win a game against a USC team that doesn't look like a true playoff contender this year.
Yeah. No, 100%. I mean, this is a big spot for Penn State. This is going to be their, big chance to kind of prove it. I was going to look at their schedule real quick, but this will be a big chance for them to prove it. This is, relatively early in this. I know it's still kind of middle of the year, but they probably haven't played, all their crazy games yet. Looking at it, they will. Yeah, it's kind of their first big game of the year. They go West Virginia, Bowling Green, Kent State, Illinois, UCLA, and then they go to USC. So this is kind of their big, in-conference game, first big in-conference game. No, disrespect to Illinois or UCLA, but I think it'll be their first big in-conference game. And then they really need that one because their schedule heats up in a hurry. They get a bye week, and then they go at Wisconsin, Ohio State, and then Washington. That is not an easy, 4 games in a row with that bye week in the middle there. That's going to be one where if they don't win that one, it could spiral going into the bye week. And then, you come out flat at Camp Randall, you lose to Ohio State, and all of a sudden season's over. Who cares? You're, 3-loss team going into Washington. Who cares?
Yeah, it's going to be a pivotal one. If you have a ticket hookup to any of these games, feel free to slide into our DMs. We would love to accompany you and make use of those tickets.
Yes.
Garrett, we've got some more hot takes to get to. A lot of people utilize that feature on our season projection surveys that went out a couple weeks ago. That was an extra question we threw in there, and there was a lot of fun responses. This one from our Big 12 survey got me pretty excited. I'm not going to lie. So I'm not going to throw in names with these because we did say that everything's going to be anonymous here. But I will shout out the person that said Utah and Kansas State will meet in the Big 12 championship at 12-0. I did check. They do not play in the regular season, so this is possible.
Yeah.
And I got to say, it's not the most outlandish thing I've heard about the Big 12 this offseason. I could definitely – look, I'm late to the Utah bandwagon. You guys have made that abundantly clear. But I'm fully on the Utah bandwagon this year. I wrote the preview articles for both of these teams that you guys can subscribe and see in our Substack. I'm high on both of them. Spoiler alert. I'm really high on both of these teams. Cam Rising and Avery Johnson could very well end up being the best 2 quarterbacks in the entire conference. And Avery Johnson, if he's as advertised, could be getting some buzz to go to New York at the end of the year. 12-0 is a whole different animal. And this conference loves to cannibalize itself. But again, I've seen crazier takes about the Big 12 this offseason.
Well, you've seen crazier takes about the Big 12 because a lot of people are talking about Colorado. So,
I
it's
knew you were going to say that. As soon as you started talking, I knew that was going to come out of your mouth.
I mean, look, that's why you heard crazier things about the Big 12 is because some people think that Colorado is going to go 12-0, and that's, that is a take. It's, not necessarily one that I'll approve, but it's certainly a take. I think for me, I feel a lot better about Utah reaching that point than I do about Kansas State. I want to kind of go through the schedules real quick, just make sure we're, looking at all these.
Before you do, both of these schedules are about as good as you could possibly ask for. When on the
Yeah.
Utah preview, I literally wrote, if you could ask Kyle Whittingham to draw up a perfect Big 12 intro schedule, his draw up would probably be pretty close to what he actually got.
Oh yeah. No, it's pretty soft. I'm not gonna lie. There's a good chance that they could run through this. So let me just start with Utah always plays great defense. They're always going to be a great defensive team. That's not really true for a lot of the Big 12. And so I think they already have an edge in all of those games just at the fact that they're going to play physical defense. They're going to dominate some lines of scrimmage, and that's always a good thing, right? So even in a game where maybe their skill talent isn't quite there or it's a tough, hostile environment, your defense travels, right? That's going to be something that goes with them to any of these games. But if I'm looking at their schedule, Utah, they got Southern Utah, Baylor, at Utah State, at Oklahoma State could be tricky. We'll have to see what happens with Ollie Gordon, unfortunately. But
that's a big wrinkle in the schedule.
We will see what happens. If they don't have Ollie Gordon, that'll be a cakewalk. If not, that should be a really fun and entertaining game. Arizona State, TCU, Houston, BYU, Colorado, Iowa State, UCF. Tell me where you're scared, because I'm just not scared of that schedule, especially not with the veteran Cam Rising coming back off injury with something to prove. I just don't see how that's a tough schedule for Utah.
Veteran is an understatement, first of all, in his 7th year of eligibility.
But
But
a veteran of the Vietnam War, actually, was what I meant.
yes, yeah, I think he fought in Vietnam and the first Gulf War, actually.
There's a chance.
Yeah. So the stretch that I'm looking at is September 14th through the 28th, because 2 road games, one at an in-state G5 school. I don't care who you are; those are always tricky. Those always get spicy. When you take a look at Utah State, they have their own problems right now. So maybe
they're down a head coach.
Maybe the schedule is just completely opening wide like the Red Sea. But
yeah,
Utah State's going to be plucky in that game. They're at home and they're an in-state rival that's a G5 school. They're going to be hyped up to host Big Brother in that game. You're absolutely right. Oklahoma State is probably their toughest road game, but they might be without their best player at that point. It would not surprise me if Ollie Gordon has a 3-game suspension and is back for that game with fresh legs, but that remains to be seen. So we'll just assume that he's going to be there for right now. That will be their toughest road game, Ollie Gordon or not. And then you get Arizona at home, a plucky team that returns a really nice quarterback in Fafita. After that, though, if they're sitting at 5-0 after the Arizona game, show me a loss, because they will not be challenged again. And so I guess TCU might give them a run for their money. I really don't know what to think about TCU. They get that
not
game
in Utah. Though. I don't think in Utah.
I don't think they're good enough to beat Utah. I totally agree. Rivalry game against BYU, but that's coming out of a bye week. I don't think they see another huge challenge until Iowa State comes to town on November 22nd. And even that's at home. So
it's at home. That's my thing. Is TCU is at home for Utah. Iowa State is.
When's
the
last
home.
time Iowa State played a game, or TCU? I guess TCU played at Colorado 2 years ago. But when's the last time a team like Iowa State played a game at altitude? Has that ever happened in the history of their program? I'm sure.
I have to go back and check, but I would doubt that it's a frequent occurrence.
The teams in the Big 12 are not used to that, and I think it's going to be an adjustment for some of them this year.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to kind of see where the schedule goes for Utah. I do think you're right that they got to get through the beginning part. I will say I think the advantage for them in the start of their schedule is they don't necessarily start that fast. They go Southern Utah, Baylor, at Utah State. Those are kind of like
Baylor game's a non-conference game. Just
and it's at home. It is at home. So again, even where you're like, ooh, Baylor, they could be not like it's at home. But if you can get your feet underneath you, figure out the style of offense you're playing, right? Like figure out all that again. then I don't think you're really worried about Oklahoma State or Arizona. I don't think you are. Now, understanding what Utah is, they could drop both of those games just because they lose games they're not supposed to. And then they could still go 10-2, make their way into the championship game, and grab, the conference championship and a playoff berth. So that's just kind of what it feels like Utah could do this year. But again, looking at it, not really concerned about their schedule. I am curious what you had to say about Kansas State. I'm not necessarily as high yet on Kansas State. I think I've kind of held back a little bit on buying in with the Wildcats this year. I think my big concern is, yes, you've got a young quarterback, very talented, lots of hype and praise. He's still young. He's still got to figure some stuff out. Hasn't necessarily shown that he's going to be a star yet. He's shown a lot of flashes where you're like, oh, I could see something there. Hasn't shown necessarily that he is a star. And they did lose their offensive coordinator, and that's never easy. So I'm kind of curious what you think with Kansas State this year.
Kansas State, I think, is far less likely to go 12-0 than Utah. I don't know that either one will. To go back to the actual hot take, I don't know that either one will. I think Utah is more likely than Kansas State because, it is a gamble to have Avery Johnson in there. It is a gamble to send away a championship winning quarterback in Will Howard and have him be picked up by one of the premier programs in the country. Obviously, he's going to be a good college quarterback. Now, Avery Johnson's ceiling is certainly higher than Will Howard. I think by the time that Avery Johnson leaves Manhattan, we will be regarding him as better than Will Howard as a whole. Certainly a better NFL prospect, but I this year in a vacuum, it's a gamble. And he does have what he does have going for him that maybe even better than Cam Rising. I think he has better weapons around him. I think having DJ Giddens as a safety blanket out of the backfield, he's got some fun wide receivers. He did lose Ben Sinnott, the tight end that was their leading receiver last year, but they brought in some nice guys from the portal. Not only did they lose their offensive coordinator, though, they also lost 4 out of their 5 starters on the offensive line. So that's going to be
not great.
And, if you're looking at potential upsets, both of these two teams love to start slow, by the way, for whatever reason.
Right.
Kansas State and Utah in the past have really struggled with slow starts. Week 2, Kansas State goes down to New Orleans to play Tulane.
Yeah.
Tulane has some of the best returning graded pass rushers per Pro Football Focus in the entire college football. So you're telling me that you're replacing 4 out of 5 starters on the offensive line. You're going to go up against that pass rush on the road? Willie Fritz or not, that's going to be a tough game for the Wildcats. After that, though, if they can get through Oklahoma State undefeated, kind of similar to Utah, though. They have the tough stretch at the start. Their close is definitely tougher than Utah's. Yeah. Because they have to go to West Virginia. They host Kansas, but I love Kansas, Garrett. I know you love Kansas this year. They haven't beaten the Wildcats in 15 years. So I got to see them do it before I predict them to do it, right? So, yeah. and then Farmageddon on the road to end the season. So the closing stretch is certainly tougher for Kansas State, but if they're sitting there at 5-0 after the Oklahoma State game, they're going to have all the momentum in the world to carry through it.
Yeah, well, and I certainly see a lot more opportunities for losses on Kansas State's schedule, but I think you're right. Like, I think that they're a more talented team overall. I think that they can get it done. It's really going to be up to the young quarterback to just prove it, right? A lot of people get their hopes into just one player. One good quarterback does not a good football team make. However, if you have a great quarterback and if he can develop into something, he can mask a lot of problems, right? He can mask a bad offensive line by being able to scramble, get outside the pocket, extend a play, right? He can mask that by making defenses pay for being over aggressive, right? Dodge a blitz and then, take off 20 yards down the field. It's going to be up to him to see like what he can do in his development, what he can do in terms of becoming a true dual threat quarterback. I know he's got great legs, being able to pass the football effectively down the field, push the ball a little bit more. That's going to be big against teams like Arizona, Oklahoma State, maybe even Tulane could get a little bit chippy there at the beginning of the season, because if he can't do that, Arizona, Oklahoma State, a couple of teams that can score points. These are teams that can definitely put up some points. They can definitely score. And so if you don't keep up with that, if you get a little behind and you have to rely on the arm of Johnson, you might be in the spot where you're like, yeah, this isn't really what we were hoping for. And yeah, it could end up bad, but that's not me saying I think that'll happen. I'm saying that's where the downside could be, right? No, it's going to be amazing, right? All the Kansas State fans who are already saying, no, he's awesome, he's incredible, he won't mess up. Like, he's still young. We've seen quarterbacks get figured out from one offseason to the next, especially when you're a young guy. You've got to be able to push your talent and your game to the next level. I think he can, but will he?
That's the $1 million question for Kansas State this year. It's a gamble. They're betting on a lot of talent, though, and that's what I think they have to hang their hat on going into this season. Garrett, let's do one more before we call it a show. We'll do some more of these on Friday's show as well. One more hot take, this time from the Big Ten survey. Rutgers will be the surprise team in the Big Ten this year. One person even went as far to say in our survey that they will finish third in the Big Ten conference this year, Garrett. Now, I did tell people they could fill it out randomly, and they might have taken some liberties with that. But Rutgers as the surprise team in the Big Ten this year, I kind of like it. I don't think this is that hot of a take because you look at the win totals. I'm pulling that up right now. First of all, they've improved every year the last few seasons. They were the doormat of college football. Shiano comes back, and they all of a sudden are competitive again, just like they were his first stint through there. I'm really interested. And you know what? Now I'm realizing that you can't find a win total on Rutgers on FanDuel because they're in New Jersey, and New Jersey has weird state laws about betting on in-state schools. So
Yeah.
I'll look that up later while you're talking. But
yeah,
Rutgers is a surprise team. I don't hate it. I think that they're going to be plucky this year.
You have a point, and I think here's the thing. Okay, let me just start with this. Rutgers is a surprise team. We can't rate that. What does that mean, right? Surprise team, like, they're going to be better than expected. They're going to win 8 games. They're going to win 10 games. They're going to win the conference. Like, what? That's kind of vague,
Let me quantify this. I'm still looking up the win total, but to me, a surprise team would be one that beats their Vegas over-under, and it looks like it's 6.5. So a surprise team beats their win total by at least 2.
Okay.
So they are sitting at 8 to 9 wins. That's a surprise team to me.
I think that's doable, and their ability to finish at the top, I think, might be a little bit better than some expect. They don't really play any of the top teams this year. I think the best team they play on their schedule is probably Wisconsin, which is kind of crazy to say. They go Howard, Akron, Virginia Tech, Washington, Nebraska, Wisconsin, UCLA, and USC in back-to-back weeks. They get their bye week. Minnesota, Maryland, Illinois, and Michigan State. There's
the shots that you just fired at LA County by saying that neither of those teams are among the best that they'll play this year.
You can say what you want to. I don't think UCLA is going to be that good this year. I really just don't see why they're going to be amazing. And USC, look, they kind of relied on Caleb Williams these last couple of years, and I don't care how good you think the next guy up is, he's not going to be Caleb Williams immediately, right? That's just not going to be what it is. I think they'll be talented on offense, but call me when they start playing defense. I know they hired a new guy, and we can speculate, but call me when they start playing defense, and I'll start talking about USC again.
I've got a hot USC take that I'm not going to say right now. I'll just tease it right now. But
previews.
Mitch is basically begging me to work it into a show really soon so that he can back it up. So, I mean, it's an interesting schedule. It's a very interesting schedule. 2-0 should be a given. Virginia Tech, I think, is a better team objectively than Rutgers in their marquee non-conference game, and it's in Blacksburg. Virginia Tech, speaking of surprise teams, could surprise a lot of people that haven't been paying attention to how that program has been being built the last few years. Washington's rebuilding. Nebraska on the road is going to be really difficult. That could be a swing game. That could be a swing game for both of these programs. The winner of that is really setting themselves up, I think, to be the surprise team. But that stretch after USC, Minnesota at Maryland, Illinois, Michigan State go 3-1 down the stretch, and you're looking at a 7 or 8 win season really quickly there. And I think to people that haven't been paying attention, that would be surprising. To people that have been watching this program build, that's the next step, is winning 8 games, pushing for 9, and getting into a even better bowl game than they've been in the past few years.
Yeah, well, and with the running back talent that they return, and with, the schedule set up the way that it does, I think this is a big year for Rutgers to kind of prove it. I think this is, your schedule will never set up like this. They don't play Ohio State. They don't play Michigan. They don't play Penn State. Those are 3 games that they've, been dropping almost, like it's just part of what they do, right? That's something you do, is just lose to those teams. They don't have to do that anymore. They can kind of, get away with it this year. They will almost never have another season where they won't play any of those 3 teams, right? There's almost no way that happens. So, I think in terms of where the conference is, in terms of where they are, you almost have to win 8 or 9 games this year, or else you might start thinking, like, is it possible? Can we do it? It'll be a little bit of a doubt for their ability to do it if they can't get it done this year.
Pop quiz, Garrett. Who is penciled in as the starting quarterback for the Rutgers Scarlet Knights this year?
They have that transfer, but I can't remember which.
He is a transfer. He's from a Big Ten school.
It's
he's from a Big Ten, former Big Ten West school.
He's the guy with the bizarre last name, right? Like Kaliak Manis or whatever.
Yeah, Ethan Click Manis from Minnesota.
Yeah,
is penciled in as the starter. So that could be an adventure. Minnesota fans will tell you that's going to be an adventure.
He could play quarterback.
He could, and I think that they're probably not going to ask him to do a lot, and that's going to be best for everybody involved.
Right.
We'll leave it there with Rutgers, and I'm not going to insult a man's character integrity anymore. I'm sure he's a fine kid. He's just not a good quarterback. Garrett, that was fun.
Okay.
He's okay.
He's playing D1 football.
He's playing D1 football. That's more than either of us could have said. So, well, guys, write in. If you have a question that you want answered for Friday's show, make sure that you send it over our way at 3TechPod on Twitter and Instagram. You can write in at 3techpod@gmail.com. Make sure that you're subscribed as we push full force into preview season in the next couple weeks and get you ready for week 0 and week 1. It's not that far away. We're in the last month without college football until February. I said that 3 times because it sounds so nice. For that man, Mr. Garrett Turney, for Mitch Mason on his honeymoon, I'm Trey Reeves. We'll see you guys next time.
Gracious him. How about